Hello, my name is Madhav, and welcome to the latest episode of my history podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about the actual war portion of the American Revolution. So, let's get started. So, in the last video, we left off with the battles of Lexington and Concord. We're going to go a bit more in depth in those battles in this video because they are the battles that started off the American Revolution, and that's kind of what we're talking about here. So, after the Boston Tea Party, the British passed the Intolerable Acts. And one of these acts in particular is very important to us here, and that is the Massachusetts Government Act. This gave wide-ranging powers to the governor of Massachusetts, who was a British official. As a result, the Patriots of Massachusetts didn't really like this, and in Suffolk County, some Patriot leaders decided to pass the Suffolk Resolves. This basically said that the Patriots didn't agree with these acts, and it gave power to a Patriot colonial government to take control and train militia in case conflict broke out. When the Continental Congress officially supported the pass of these Suffolk Resolves, the British government decided that the state of Massachusetts was in a state of rebellion, and they decided to send troops to seize colonial arms, ammunition, and leaders in the city of Concord. To get to Concord, however, they first had to march through the city of Lexington, and as they were marching through, they met a Patriot militia. Unfortunately, fighting broke out, and no one really knows who started the fight, but the Patriots were forced to fall back. The Patriots then held another stand at Concord against the pursuing British, and due to a much larger amount of Patriots who had arrived to help them, they easily won, and the First Battle of the American Revolution was an American victory. The declaration of Massachusetts to be in a state of rebellion and the Battle of Lexington and Concord happened from February to April of 1775. 1 month later, in May of 1775, another major colonial victory would occur, when Ethan Allen and the Green Mountain Boys seized the British fort of Ticonderoga in New York. As a result of all these new developments, the British government issued the Proclamation of Rebellion in August of 1775, which stated the 13 colonies were in a state of rebellion and authorized British military responses against the colonists. So, after hearing about the Proclamation of Rebellion, the Second Continental Congress did two major things. First, they created the Continental Army and placed George Washington in charge. And the second thing they did was they created the Olive Branch Petition, basically a last-ditch effort to patch things up with Britain and become a colony of Britain again. And they made a bunch of demands. The British king denied these demands, and as a result, a war ensued. All of this occurred in June of 1775. About 2 months earlier, in April of that same year, the British had also blockaded and taken over the city of Boston, and the colonists had been making many attempts to try to free the city. One of these attempts was the Battle of Bunker Hill. In June of 1775, the colonists were besieging the city of Boston, which was under British control. Eventually, they learned that the British were planning to fortify unoccupied hills outside the city, so they sneakily occupied two major hills, Bunker Hill and Breed's Hill. The British came out to meet them, and a large battle ensued. And though the colonial militia on these hills was eventually destroyed, they managed to inflict double as many casualties as they had taken during the battle, and this became a major calling cry for the Americans. The siege of Boston would finally be ended in March of 1776, when George Washington and his army arrived with cannons captured from Fort Ticonderoga. These cannons were set up over the bay and aimed at the British ships, which forced the British to leave as their supply lines were being threatened. This ended the siege of Boston and was a major American victory. A few months later, on July 4th of 1776, the Second Continental Congress officially ratified the Declaration of Independence, marking the birth of the United States of America. From June to October of the next year, 1777, the British launched the Saratoga Campaign. The goal of this campaign was to gain control of the Hudson River Valley. And it was this campaign that brought the two battles of Saratoga. The battles of Saratoga were fought 18 days apart, and eventually ended in a major American victory and helped to secure French aid for the American colonies. It also helped to prove American military strength against the much superior British army. In December of 1777, another major event in the war would also occur. It was the start of the 6-month encampment at Valley Forge. George Washington's army had been defeated at the Battle of the Brandywine a month before the battles of Saratoga, and as a result, they were forced to flee and encamp in the woods of Valley Forge in Philadelphia. Eventually, in 1788, the Americans managed to get the French on their side. The French had had a long time feud with the British, ever since the French and Indian War and even before, into the Wars of the Austrian Succession. In fact, it goes back so far that even in the Middle Ages, the English and the French were constantly at war. This, along with a string of recent American victories, managed to convince the French to join the American cause and launch a series of naval campaigns against the British in Europe. It also convinced them to send battalions of soldiers to help the Americans in the Americas, resulting in much needed support against the superior British army. In 1781, the Siege of Yorktown was the final major battle in the American Revolution. With their French allies led by the Marquis de Lafayette, George Washington finally forced the British garrison at the city of Yorktown to surrender and ended the American Revolutionary War. 2 years later, the war officially ended with the Treaty of Paris, marking the birth of the United States of America as an official and independent power. That concludes today's episode. In the next episode, we'll go into the early government of the United States of America, the Articles of Confederation, and all up until the French Revolution and America's pardon. But that's it for today. Thank you.